what are your biggest fears right now?
A second Nakba.
Today on Real Talk, we speak to Husam Zomlot, who has been serving as Palestinian ambassador to the UK since 2018.
How many times you have interviewed Israeli officials, Louise? Hundreds of times. Hundreds of times. How many times Israel have committed war crimes right live on your own cameras? Do you start by asking them to condemn themselves? Have you? You don't. You don't.
Many of his interviews have recently gone viral for challenging mainstream narratives on the war between Israel and Palestine. In light of the ensuing Israeli bombardment of Gaza, which followed a Hamas-led attack on Israel which killed over 1,400 people, we sat down with the ambassador for a frank conversation on the increasingly dire situation in the besieged Gaza Strip, where Israeli airstrikes have claimed the lives of over 3,700 Palestinians so far, including over 1,000 children. Dr. Husam Zomlot, thank you for taking time to speak to us today. We're speaking on the 11th day of the eruption of the Israel-Palestine war. Gaza is currently being bombarded. There's over 2,800 that have been killed. During times like this, does your job shift as a Palestinian diplomat? What becomes your priority?
Of course, during such times, priorities become more. How do we save lives? How do you represent your people in the best way possible? How do you take up your responsibility, because you are a voice in one of the most important capitals, that is London. And add to that, because of the tension and the situation, you are also worried about your staff and your team and the protection of your team and the protection of your own family, your own kids, because we have been receiving many death threats at the Palestinian mission.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. Can you tell me more about that?
Well, there are people who would want to use this opportunity to divert and deflate. And there are people who see us being a voice for our people, and they don't accept that voice. There are people who want the narrative to continue as it is, the discourse to continue as it is. They don't like that narrative to be challenged. And when it is challenged, their hatred and their violence might come out at the voice rather than at the messenger rather than the message. And this is what has been happening, and we have informed the British authorities and the British police, and we have asked for police presence and protection, because the level of threat is increasing by the day. So nonetheless, where I'm going with this is that you have to think about all these things.
What are your biggest fears? I mean, Gaza is under a complete siege. There's the threat of a looming ground invasion, an Israeli ground invasion. What are your biggest fears right now?
A second Nakba. And I think...
a second Nakba?
Yes, that's my biggest fear. And I think the Israeli political class and military class have that in mind. And I don't think they are very public about it. When Netanyahu makes a coalition, and in the coalition, people like Smotrich and Ben-Gvir and others, when his finance minister says only recently in Paris that the Palestinian people simply do not exist, and he had a map in front of him showing Palestine and Jordan all together as Israel. When Ben-Gvir is busy handing machine guns to Israeli civilians, and you know what is the intention, I am worried for a second Nakba, not only in Gaza, but in the West Bank, and even against our people inside Israel, the Palestinian citizens of Israel, the 48 Palestinians. Yeah, a second Nakba is in our head, and this might be the first situation in human history where refugees, those who have been ethnically cleansed from their homes, are about or are intended to live that experience again. It's unbelievable that, I was born in a refugee camp to the very south of Gaza, and I know the collective memory of the Palestinian refugees and what happened in the Nakba, how my grandfather had to carry my father, and all these stories. And that collective experience is being relived right now. Mm-hmm. And this is why we are all alarmed by this, and we must stop it, and we will stop it, because I think our people will not allow for this. No way. Because we learned the hard way. We learned that, if you want to protect your family, you end up, losing everything else. You lose your home, you lose your land, you lose your identity, you lose your rights, and you are never allowed to return. We also learned the hard way that, staying in your home, even if Israel takes away your life, even if you are subjected to these brutalities, might be a better option than leaving your home. That's the lesson of 1948. And that's the lesson of 1967 as well. The Netanyahu agenda has been on the table for 20 years and it brought nothing but mayhem, carnage, killings, primarily of Palestinians, and the killing of the hope for a two-state solution. That agenda has got to be defeated. That agenda has got to be defeated. And we together have to provide another agenda, a different path, an alternative horizon for our people and all people in the region. Our people deserve to live in dignity, with justice, to attain their rights. These rights are birthrights. Right of self-determination is non-negotiable for any nation. The right to return to their homes is non-negotiable. It's granted in international resolutions. And therefore, this is a moment for us, not only to defeat the agenda of ethnic cleansing and second Nakba, but to defeat the Netanyahu agenda of no hope, of only security for Israel, as if security can be attained for one part. This is a moment when we tell Netanyahu and the Israeli public and the political class that you cannot have security without giving security to everyone. Yeah. This is a moment when we tell and shout out that military solution does not exist. You cannot resolve political issues with military options. And this is a moment when we tell everybody the only option is a political way forward.
Keeping in mind everything you just said, Ambassador, I mean, how do you juxtapose this with the comments recently made by the Israeli ambassador in the UK, who went on TV just recently and said that there's no humanitarian crisis in Gaza?
Well, I don't want to comment on the Israeli spokespeople and ambassadors. This has been a trend over the course of 75 years since Israel was established. The propaganda and the way of framing the conversation, the way that they turn the table upside down and always portraying Israel as the victim in everything, and we are the aggressors, is a business we know about, and it has gone on for a long time. So this is part of that business, when in fact the truth is very well documented. So this is a moment not to comment on them, but to comment on international media and to make sure that international media does challenge that and stop allowing for such propaganda to appear on their sets and seriously provide the accurate information. What is happening in Gaza is not just a humanitarian crisis. It's a humanitarian catastrophe in a new proportion that might not have ever been seen before by our people or any other people. I don't want to go into details, but whoever did that interview must have challenged that, must have shown numbers, statistics, pictures, photos, images, footage, real names of people, must have told that ambassador, you're lying.
Well, for now, Ambassador, we're just going to end it here. We are spending a day together. You've been gracious with your time. We're going to continue the conversation elsewhere. Do you ever think about the children of Gaza, Ambassador? I mean, there's over 1 million child in Gaza, and this is becoming the 5th war in the last 15 years. So if you're a 15-year-old child in Gaza, this is all you know. What kind of impact does that have on a child?
Everlasting. Yesterday I tweeted the photo of Yasser, a child who was hanging by his mother, who was on a emergency bed. Both of them were bombarded. Luckily, thank goodness, they survived barely. And when I saw that video, it literally broke my heart. And I really wanted to embrace, to hug Yasser and to whisper in his ears that his future, inshallah, will be better, that we will make sure that this does not happen again to him and to his family. The way I saw Yasser is the way I saw my own childhood and the way I see Palestinian children's, not only in Gaza, but in the West Bank. Not only in the West Bank, but also in refugee camps everywhere. Look what is happening in our refugee camps in Lebanon, in Syria, and everywhere. Our children have not had an opportunity to live and grow up as children for almost 100 years. We have had many generations that have not experienced what real childhood is. Yasser deserves to play, have fun, be hugged, laugh. I couldn't imagine a child would be caring. You're talking about a child who, I don't know his exact age, but I don't think he's more than 3 or 4 years. Yeah. I was looking at that video like 10 times and weeping, actually.
Weeping?
Yes, because I felt some sense of helplessness. I wanted to be there. I couldn't imagine a child of 3 or 4 years old is comforting his mother. It should be the other way around. It really should be. He was trying to tell her, calm down. A child should never, ever go through such an experience. Nowhere, and not in Palestine.
When the defense minister refers to Palestinians as human animals, how does it strike you?
Strikes me as a preparation and a license for their soldiers, because that's the Minister of Defense, between parentheses. He should be called the Minister of Offense and Aggression. But that statement is not just a reaction. It's a framing statement. It's a psychological statement. It's a statement that has been fed into the Israeli psyche for a long time, since Israel has been established. And it is primarily directed at the fact that what the Israeli soldiers are killing are not really humans. Because, how can these soldiers go back to their families and their kids and sleep at night if in their hearts they think they have just killed a human being, a child, a mother, a grandmother, has just wiped out an entire family? So their trick here, their strategy, is to convince that soldier, that officer, that what you have done has nothing to do with humans. And that has been happening for a long time, and it's very regrettable, very regrettable. And I was expecting to hear international outcry and outroar, hearing such racist statements that leads to war crimes and mass destruction and mass killings.
We spoke earlier about British politics. How have you seen this play out in British politics? I mean, the government, the Sunak, the Tory government, has said that they stand by Israel unequivocally. How did you see that stance?
Well, we've been saying that the British government needs to regain balance, and they need to make sure that international law is respected, and they need to take up their responsibility that is historic, moral, legal, and political very seriously. They have a role to play, and that role has not been played in the way it should. The UK should, as a permanent member of the Security Council, the UK should, as was the case that it has issued the Balfour, the infamous Balfour Declaration, denying us the definition of peoplehood, turning us into minorities, non-Jewish minorities, and then the mandate denying us statehood and recognition. And all the way fast forward to today, the UK could take this as an opportunity to once and for all set the record clear the mess, and correct history.
What about the Labour Party in terms of their stance? I mean, Keir Starmer has been widely criticized for what he said, which was basically that Israel has a right to withdraw water and electricity from Gazans.
That was a very poor performance and a very poor statement from somebody who his career was a lawyer in international law. However, we are following that he has corrected that, and he has called for full enforcement of international law and the protection of civilians everywhere. And we now want to look to the future for Labour to really implement what they say by fully recognizing the state of Palestine. That's their platform for many years, and not avoid that historic opportunity to recognize the state of Palestine and to fully enforce the power of law on all sides.
The last question before we end in this segment, you speak about the community, speak about grief. How are you dealing with your team? Because I was speaking to a member of your team who's lost a member of his extended family. You've lost members of your family. I'm sure there's more that either know people that they lost or have lost members of their own family, and the community at large. How are you dealing with all of this grief in this very difficult moment?
To be together, we are a very small team in comparison to other missions here. But some of members of my team come from Gaza, and they have families, and they have lost members of their family. The first thing is to convene meetings, team meetings all the time. We did that yesterday, we'll do that today, to be there for each other, to console one another. But if I am lucky in this latest crisis and in all previous situations, it's the team. So while the team is grieving, while many of them are in a state of mourning, they are at full capacity. You're talking about almost little sleep for every one of them. They are around the clock. You just saw them now. And this is really a story to be told about a people that no matter what would dedicate their life and would dedicate their time not to their personal grievances, but for the grievances of their entire nation and the rights of their nation. So I am very, very grateful for my team.
Dr. Hashem, you spoke earlier today about media coverage of what's been happening. I want to talk to you about this. Again, as we mentioned just a little bit earlier, you've been very visible. You've given, quite a few interviews. I've watched a large number of them, and each and every one of them that I have watched began with asking you to condemn the violence, to condemn Hamas. I want to ask you, how has your media experience been in this specific situation?
Telling and confirming all that I have been believing in, that our main issue and the first challenge we always have is the media, simply because the media starts by framing the whole situation in such a wrong, deliberate misinformation, deliberate defamation of the Palestinian people and our struggle. Our position is very clear. We do not condone violence on all sides, and our position has been clear for 30 years. So, but the question is not designed to really get your position. The question is designed to give the impression for the millions of viewers that it's the Palestinians that are actually the instigators of all violence, when in fact the Palestinians have been the receivers of unimaginable violence over a course of 100 years. So my rejection of the question is on the basis of the premise of it, because the moment you
reject the premise of it.
The premise of it. Yeah. The whole idea is to reject the premise, not the idea that nobody condones. Of course, we don't condone that. And the moment you say yes, without any balance and context, without them asking Israeli officials the same question, and I've been saying this all over, means that you accept their logic. And what is their logic? What is the media logic by insisting all the time for 100 years on that? The logic is, if you accept it, and then the Israelis are not asked the same question, the Israeli officials and spokespeople, then you accept that you are a lesser of a people, right? You accept that your blood is less valued than their blood. Why don't you ask the one before me, the Israeli ambassador, should he or she condemn the murder of a child in Jerusalem by an organized army, by a government that the world recognizes and has a seat in the United Nations? That's Israel. Why didn't you? So the moment you accept that logic is a moment when you accept that you are a lesser of a human being and your people are not as equal and important in the eyes of the international media. It's an upside down complete logic. So challenging that is paramount for all of us as Palestinians, as Arabs, as our friends worldwide. It's paramount that we challenge this, because this has led us to where we are. They always want you to lose before you begin. Listen to me carefully. They want you to lose. The moment you say yes or no, you've lost. You've lost. Because then you're framed. That's it, you're framed. And what we are doing right now is to say, enough. Enough. Enough of that. Zoom out. Breathe. Zoom out. Look at the situation. Don't snapshot this. Don't snapshot this. History did not begin on the 7th of October. History began on the 16th of November, 1917. History began with the Balfour Declaration 106 years ago. And the whole media, international mainstream media, start locating their moral compass on a snapshot. So on the 7th of October, there is the compass. There is the moral compass of the whole conversation. There is the start. As if it's completely void of anything that happened before or anything that could happen after. No. Stop there. You've done this for too long, and what you have done has led to people being killed.
Do you think that there's an underlying notion in the media that as a Palestinian, if you're not condemning violence, that you're somehow in favor of it?
Well, that's exactly the problem. The problem is they are talking to a representative of the Palestinian government and the Palestinian people, and our position is very clear. The only position that is not clear is that of the occupier. I haven't, since 1948, I haven't heard an Israeli prime minister or government official said that we are sorry about what we did in 1948. We're sorry about all the massacres that happened. I haven't heard the word we condemn this or that. Did you hear Netanyahu condemning the settler militias right now, wreaking havoc in the West Bank? This is the issue. The issue is, why do you expect us? Of course, our position is very well known. So we don't accept their game anymore. That's it. We are not going to be drawn to their game. We will stop dancing on these tunes, because for 30 years since the signing of Oslo, we have been saying we do not condone any acts of violence against civilians. Of course we do, and it's not by words, it's by deed. We have been committed to our commitments. But the insistence of that does not mean they really want to know our opinion. They're not talking to me when they're asking me. They are talking to their viewers. They want their viewers to believe that the only side that needs to be condemned is the Palestinian side. Now that's a business that has gone on for a long time, and we must end it.
I want to touch on something that you just brought up, the humanity in the coverage. So the humanity in terms of how major Western media outlets have basically presented the victims on one side, but not equally presented them on the other. So like you said, I mean, the Israeli victims, they led beautiful lives. They were mothers, they were brothers, fathers, sisters, they had aspirations, they had careers and all of that. But on the Palestinian side, I mean, what we've been seeing in terms of the coverage is that they're numbers, they're bodies, they're statistics. How do you look at this equation, or how do you look at this scenario?
Very asymmetric, and it follows from our previous conversation. All victims are, for the media, names and human beings and stories and dreams and neighbors and classmates and all that, except the Palestinians. So 2,000 Palestinians have been killed, 3,000 Palestinians have been killed. What about that very prominent doctor in Gaza, a lady who was killed only 3 days ago? We would want to see international media tell us about her. Where did she study? Why did she decided to be a medical doctor? How many kids she has? What was her relationship with her neighbors? What was her next step? Was she really thinking about doing something else with the medical sector in Gaza? The British media and the American media and the international media has got to show the world that we are talking about real people, equal people, dignified people, special people, rooted people. There was a blackout on the Palestinian people for a long time. Blackout. Is that a term I can use? And this is a time when we bring light, a real light, and focus on a history that has been mixed with tears, but also hopes. And this is about time that we give the people the voice that they deserve.
I know you're in mourning, Ambassador, but can you tell me about the 6 family members that you have lost?
Well, my cousin Aya, she is the daughter of my aunt, Hiam, and she's a normal, decent, loving human being, known for her sense of humor. Wherever we are, and Aya is there, it's a source of laughter and good time and decent human being. Married with 4 children. Living in a house that also hosts her in-laws. And, at the beginning of the latest onslaught, her house was bombarded without any warning. She was just sitting with her kids and her husband and her in-laws. And all except 2 were killed, including my cousin Aya, her husband, 2 of her children. The other 2 are in intensive care. The 2 that survived were twins, 2.5 years old. Carmen and Karim. So it's really heartbreaking, and heartbreaking not only because they are my family, the entire Palestinian people are my family, but it's heartbreaking because I cannot imagine a family sitting in their home and being slaughtered this way without any warning, any shelter, anywhere to go. I cannot imagine the carnage. What must have gone into their heads in the few seconds before and in the few seconds during. These things are in my head all the time.
I want to share a video with you that you actually have shared on your Twitter, and this is a video of your nephew. For a brief second, I just wanted to get your basically description. I want you to describe what this scene is. Put it up right here.
يابا تعال الله خذ جوال ولا حاجة.
This is during shelling.
لا ولا شيء. هاي عمار تعال.
This is your sister's son.
Yes.
مين؟
So what's happening here?
Well, my sister and her husband and her family live in the south of Gaza. They live, Israel has decided or has informed publicly that the Gaza Valley is the point where people can go beyond and then they're safe. She lives beyond that line. Because of that, many of her friends and many of her, even second and third friends, friends of friends, I mean, have asked if they can stay with her, coming from north. Therefore, it was supposed to be a safe area for these families. And who are there for her friends? Families like her, mothers and fathers with their kids, children primarily. So my sister has to host around 150 in her home that was not supposed to host more than maybe 7 or 9 since the beginning of this aggression and airstrikes. And Ammar, who's 8 years old, my nephew, went out to buy bread from a shop that is literally a few meters away from their home. The one who took that video is from my sister's home, so you could see it's a very close proximity, these families believing that the south is at least spared. And then he goes into the shop and an Israeli rocket hit the building that the shop is in. Miraculously, he survived. He came out of the smoke and we saw that moment. Now Ammar is the youngest and the most spoiled in the family and we all love him. And we are so relieved that he was not killed. But with Ammar were other children who were hosted by my sister, and thankfully they were also fine. Some cuts and bruises, and this is not just about being killed. I can only think of my nephew and the many like my nephew about the psychological impact. These things will live with them for the rest of their lives. And again, I would only want to, if I can, just delete that moment from his memory. That's the best I can do from his memory and our memory, because this is really traumatic, and for a child like Ammar, it should not have happened.
My last question for you, Ambassador, and we'll leave it here. You're a father. Do your children speak to you about what's happening? What do you tell them? Do you have conversations about what's happening right now?
They do, and they always have questions, and I always try my best to answer in very basic and what's the word, human way. I also want to protect my children from any feel of despair or being concerned about themselves or their father. So we have difficult conversations to make sure that our kids grow in a very natural, normal situation, understand their history, understand where they come from, understand their rights, and continue with their nation the struggle for their rights, but at the same time have as normal life as possible. That's a very difficult task for a father to do, and I hope I manage to strike the balance in some way or another.
We'll leave it here. Thank you so much for your time today, Ambassador.
You're most
Appreciate
welcome.
your time. Thank you.